When I think about sort of the loss of precision that we've had as a result of sort of this ongoing, 10-year third-party cookie erosion, I sort of think about context or category, device. Then there's like time of day and geography, and to the extent that you can sort of predict that you'll reach the right person based on some combination of that, it's really useful. So are there other missing elements of targeting that folks should be layering in as well? Even if they don't have identity.
Sure. I mean, I think my big thing here is we don't have to forget about the audience, even with the imprecise signal. So, um, context, still a signal that's out there, as you said. We can use that, but let's bring them together. So, the AI modeling against first party data sets or things like our data still enable these additional, signals, if you will, to be used for targeting. So demographics, in-market behaviors, audience interest or persona groups, things like that. I think to your point, a lot of us have associated them with being tied to IDs and the only
Hmm.
way to get to them, but they're not actually gone. And just because those signals, as we know them, have become more limited, it doesn't mean that the personalized and targeted advertising is going to go away. So we do have these privacy centric solutions bringing together AI modeling, gives the targeting longevity at the end of the day. And it's still those audiences we're accustomed to. It's just, again, the same way I say it breaks my brain of why is this partner talking to this partner? It's like we all need to train ourselves like, okay, audiences and identity are not just tied to IDs at the end of the day. We don't need those trade-offs between privacy and relevancy. But at the same time, to your point, still have the context layered in. We still want the category, the device, the time of day, geography. It's not, hey, I want this audience, but it can be the middle of the night and where no one's going to see an ad. It's a tree falls in the forest kind of thing here. Let's keep using all of them. It just doesn't require an ID at the end of the day. We can bring it all together, leveraging these data sets to still have audience targeting, serve it with a contextual signal.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I was recently at the Brand Safety Summit, ran into Ang Rodriguez and the Proximic team, which is part of Comscore. And we had some interesting conversations there at the event. So I'm pleased to have her here to continue that conversation. The Brand Safety Summit is only one of the summits and events that discusses brand safety. So I'm curious to know sort of where the Comscore and Proximic solution fits into the brand safety ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So at Proximic, I think we're a division within Comscore that I joke sometimes that part of my role has just been the education and evangelization that Comscore has this side of the business. So we really focus on leveraging that underlying data that Comscore has for targeting use cases. So within Proximic, we do offer brand protection solutions for both advertisers and publishers. And where I think it's really stood out most recently has been that it can be leveraged across all digital mediums, including CTV and live streaming. So that's one of the places we've had a lot of questions recently. That being said, though, to your point, we've really been focusing a lot, and we'll probably talk about today, on our ID-free audiences. We call them predictive audiences. And really with having a partner who, a single partner who can ensure an ad served to the right person with the audiences, but also being able to layer in that content safety side and the brand protection and suitability is really where conversations have laid most recently, and what's been a real differentiator for us when having discussions.
Right. So the plumbing continues to exist in sort of its old way for a little while longer with regards to Chrome and the deprecation of cookies. But both the publisher side, brands and agencies are all sort of still, I think, trying to get the new lay of the land as it relates to understanding where do identity graphs fit in, where does brand safety fit in, where does humanity fit in, like all of these factors relate to some extent to the existence or non-existence of third-party cookies as well as first-party cookies. So, for folks who are still getting their hands around that, what's the best way for them to think through, how to solve for that, the future of identity, the future of brand safety, given where we are now?
Sure. And I think it is really an evolution at the end of the day. Funny enough, I kind of think of this as it's a question we've been asking and answering for a couple of years now. I know Google did another date change last week, so it feels like, I hate to say it, 2 years from now, I hope we're not having the exact same question and answer in here. And I really look at it as like, don't take the Google date change as meaning we can take our foot off the gas, because there's a lot of folks out there, to your point, cookie deprecation. So sometimes I'll be asked this question just in terms of like, what's the solution? What do we do around cookies going away? And for me, you'll hear me a lot of times say things like signal loss or ID free, not just cookie free, because there's different pieces going on here where it's like, okay, yes, there's cookie deprecation. There's different browsers handling things on their own timelines. We have the iOS privacy changes that have rolled out. So if we look at things from stats that are out in the market, I think it's the IAB saying there's only 40% of the bid stream even has identifiers on it today. So people talk about cookies going away and we're like 60% is already gone. One of our major network partners was telling us about 30% of their inventory has IDs. So there's a lot of things we're already seeing in action right now. And I would say, great, IDs are still here. Use them. There's a lot we've been using them for. Really, though, let's look to things where it's not tied to, I would say, let's just call it, again, a single identifier. So those contextual backed solutions, they'll get you a ton of scale. There's then the alternative IDs. They play a role, definitely providing less scale and a much bigger technical lift to implement. But we do understand people want to be using IDs, all IDs, first party data, really to do some of that retargeting work that they're used to within there. I think IP addresses still there a little bit and being used. My guess, they're going to be impacted next by a lot of the privacy regulations. And then again, just like I mentioned there, those privacy regulations overall, they're continuing to roll out. We've seen some recently in Washington and Nevada at a state level. So how they start to play in, those are less of a technological change and more of that legislative change. But that's where I say, in trying to tie that back to the technology, we need to start to look at, I think I heard recently, even on the alt ID space, there's 80 different options in market. Having this benefit of a little more time on the Google side of things, but let's start to look at the solutions that exist that aren't getting impacted by the privacy laws that continue to roll out. Like they've already developed a solution like we have here at Proximic, where it's like, yes, we're already privacy focused, built for the future. It's not a temporary solution for the current legislations and technological restrictions we have today, but going to need to pivot again later. Some of those solutions, I think we're going to start seeing, that 80 start to dwindle as, more changes come out.
Right, right. Well, while you've got folks in the government out there potentially, or at least attempting to protect privacy, all those same politicians, political parties, and PACs are big advertisers, and this is going to be a big year for that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, given the fact that identity as well as geography make a huge difference, right, in political advertising, how you see this year shaping up, and from the perspective of political advertising.
Political years are always fun. And it's interesting because, in the past, especially our last big political year, it was a completely different type of race. We had huge, even at the presidential level, primaries going on, lots of debates, huge candidate pools, as opposed to this year going into it, we're almost halfway through the year. The presidential race, we know who the candidates are there for the most part. But from a, ad tech industry, what we're looking at, what I've been personally really excited about, we get to tap into that massive Comscore data set. And this is where, while everyone thinks about things of, hey, even on the presidential side, it's a national race. And there's a lot of campaigns that across the country people are keeping an eye on. At the end of the day, all of that political advertising is still bought locally, even if we're talking about a national campaign. So things that might work for a national advertiser who's buying nationally are not always going to work for a presidential campaign bought locally. So this is where we're always talking about make sure you have data that can get broken down really granularly, even down to a zip code level. For us, one of the things, we were really happy to launch back at the end of last year that was first to market linear retargeting audiences, but again, built based off of that local TV ad exposure. So whether candidates want to amplify the TV messaging with retargeting across CTV, anything digital, or even reach extension, target those not exposed to TV, being able to do that at a local level. But as I love to say, things can always get spicy in the political world. And I know the first thing people are thinking, and we always get asked, is this just for my own candidate? Are there some restrictions here? Absolutely not. It's just everything we're seeing out there. So we're definitely seeing people pick these up for the competitors. So it's not necessarily the retargeting, the reach extension. It's wait, someone saw my competitor's ad on TV. I want to hit them up on CTV, hit them up with that messaging. And again, at scale, doing it on CTV, doing it with signal loss. All the worlds are really combining here between what's going on in the privacy landscape, like you mentioned, how that's equating with the campaigns, also making sure things like actual, not just the media behaviors and what they're exposed to, but the viewpoints people have. We have L2's audiences out there. And I know, the biggest question, accuracy. We're not just like, hey, we can get a bunch of people, make sure that there's no trade-off there between the accuracy and scale and making sure we can do that. And it's been, like I said, it's very different from your typical big national advertisers we talk to on a daily basis. The political side keeps it interesting for us.
Yeah, sure. The one thing I've noticed is that the lines are becoming increasingly blurry. Like 10 years ago, if you looked at Terry Kawaja's Lumascape, right, you had DSPs, you had SSPs, you had exchanges in the middle. And now, like, people are plugging into each other in a lot of different ways. And sometimes, a DSP has direct publisher relationships with a lot of publishers, right? And so you're sort of, you have to think through it in a different way, right? At the agency side, at the client side, and publishers even need to start thinking about it differently. There's been a huge focus on them building first party data because that's one of the ways they can maybe bring some yield back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to get your thoughts on sort of where Comscore fits in that ecosystem and who they're plugging into and who they're helping, because now that the lines are a lot blurrier, right? You might have said a different thing 3, 4, 5 years ago versus now.
Oh, you're right. Comscore overall too, we've diversified and changed a lot. I've been here almost 17 years now. So I'm excited about what we've done. I love seeing everything come together. But it's a lot of different things. When I started here, I always joke like smartphones were just becoming a thing. We didn't need to measure smartphones. There's no CTV now. How do we make sure there's really that unified view of the consumer? And to your point, I know we've mentioned the advertisers so far. At the end of the day, one of the original things we've always said when I started at Comscore was we're trying to be unbiased data, unbiased third-party partner. And that's still the case today, really making sure we're working with both the buy side and the sell side. And I kind of always joke about it. And I say, like, when I come to work, I put on my hat and we're like, okay, there's streaming, there's linear television, there's digital. When I go home at night, I don't ask my husband, like, would you like to stream a show this evening, or would you like to watch it on linear, or would you like to, cast something from your phone? We're just there like, hey, what are we going to watch tonight? So we're trying to make sure from both in the fragmented yet still converged landscape that we have out there, how do we make sure that we still have modern media measurement as well as modern media targeting and optimization so that when we're talking to the advertisers, they're able to go out there, plan their campaigns, target with it, as well as measure it. Think of it always as really advertise nationally, optimize locally. To your point, though, at the same time, we have these publisher relationships. They want to use that same data. I mentioned earlier, one of our partners who was like, hey, we're down to only 30% of our inventory having IDs. And where things get interesting now is from our data being taken out to the ecosystem, I always look at it as what makes it most efficient for all the partners. And to your point, it's we need to be in DSPs, we need to be in SSPs, we need to be integrated into ad servers. We're talking to the publishers, some want a direct integration, some have a CMS, some have an ad server, really just making sure that data is there. And then to your point, this interesting convergence, because then they have direct relationships with the DSPs. So there's times where we're playing in the middle to say, hey, we're actually integrated with both of you. And they'll come to us and say, hey, we're the publisher, you've analyzed all of our content, you've given us the audiences. That's great. We use that when we're selling directly. We also are doing some programmatic. Can you make sure that that data on those audiences can be leveraged for our programmatic sale so we can package up on that side? So at the end of the day, I feel like as much as the solutions and the inventory and the content are the same, everyone's having a unique conversation where we're just like, just tell us where you need it. And to your point, I feel like there's many days I say, hold on, this is breaking my brain. Why is this partner working with this partner? And then they're like, nope, yep. When we set up our business, it was not set up this way, but supply path optimization, how do we get everyone? We're like, great, just tell us where you need it. And we're just shipping it out, trying to align however they're going to market.
Right. So, given that, you've got sort of individuals anonymized or not, right, and you've got context, it really sounds like you need a multi-pronged targeting strategy. And I'd love to hear sort of how that's evolving and how the platforms are sort of adjusting to, find audiences in different ways, or maybe layer data on to say, well, it's increasing the odds that this person's in my audience, right? You might not know for sure, but in order to get scale, sometimes you have to go a little bit probabilistic, right? As opposed to, knowing for sure that, you're chatting with me.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're exactly right. I think it is the multiple tactics. And it's a few things. Everyone says it differently. There's like, are you going after your ideal audience? Are you going after your ideal audience with scale? Because there's a lot of pieces there where I would say spread that targeting budget out. Some's going to be with the remaining cookies or IDs that they have. Some will be contextual targeting, first party data for that re-engagement or testing of alternative IDs as well. But the interesting part here is we've had a lot of, and again, like I said, we've had the runway, deadlines have changed. Initially, a lot of folks were like, we are so good. First party data is our solution. We are A-OK. And then it was, wow, that's great, but that is not at scale. Like that is not going to scale for us. But for that tactic of retargeting, hitting your loyal customers, it's phenomenal. How do we get that incremental halo though? For the cookie side of things, those IDs, again, let's use them for the retargeting while we can. And even the alt IDs, they can help there with the retargeting. The contextual piece though, this is where I feel like it's a powerhouse in terms of the acquisition, the scale. And what we really end up comparing to is I feel like we're not talking about ages ago in the industry when it was like, oh, I only had contextual. What's this new ID-based targeting I can do? Everyone has this comparison point of what was my scale when we still had all the cookies, all the mobile IDs, and trying to get back to that. So where we then go, again, getting in the weeds a little bit with the contextual piece is it's not just that contextual that we had years ago. So from our perspective, it's really that marriage of AI with contextual. So you're still doing audience targeting at the end of the day. It's just contextually served. It's not just saying my only options are the endemic content. So making sure you're playing off both of those to say, go with your first party, go with any of the cookies that you have remaining, get that additional halo from things like ID-free audiences like we do with our predictive audiences. And then yes, layer on that standard contextual piece to get any additional scale. So you get scale, you have flexibility. But again, I mean, it's not one size fits all. What are the KPIs we're going after? What are we looking to do here? Make sure we have performance, whether it's branding or performance, top of funnel, bottom funnel. But then, like we said earlier, there's the seller side of things. They still need to monetize the inventory. That's why we can't just say go ID based, because then you need both the buy side and sell side leveraging that same ID, which isn't a cookie that's universal across the board there.
Right, right. And I would imagine you hear a lot about or get a lot of questions about folks with iOS specifically, right? Because they tend to have the biggest firewall between anything, any good juicy targeting and having the ad servers available to use that, which I mean the those of us who like the idea of targeting not only as marketers but as consumers, because we don't want to see irrelevant advertising as a
Right.
consumer, right? You might say, well, that's actually counterproductive to the ecosystem at large. But how should we deal as marketers with the sort of firewalls that iOS has put up, both on mobile web with Safari, but also apps, right? Obviously, are pretty locked down with
Yeah.
regards to what they can pass.
I mean, it's a great point because I think Safari's been blocked by default since 2020. The iOS 17 changes really furthered those challenges, even down to, not to get too in the weeds here, but even those query parameters in the URL. So then people couldn't even tell, compared to their marketing campaigns, the specific URLs folks were visiting, not to mention all the changes we're already aware of. Just, that was kind of the next step in it all. And from our measurement side of the house, and from what a lot of research has shown us, it's not just the like, hey, there's additional reach or scale we're leaving on the table. Those iOS users are actually proven to be more valuable. On average, they have a higher annual income. They're more likely to splurge on shopping compared to Android users. So really what we've seen is the only viable solution left to target those audiences is one that's contextually served at the end of the day. So this is where, and I say similar to what we were mentioning earlier, not just standard contextual that has a role here, but what we're doing is making sure you still have a defined audience. You're still doing audience targeting, but not using that ID to serve. And when we talk about both the buy side and the sell side, it's great. Your advertisers, these are more valuable folks. We want to have it. But we've had conversations with a lot of publishers who earlier this year, late last year, were like, we had to just stop monetizing all of our iOS inventory. We didn't think there was a solution that was out there where we could. So this is where it's been interesting, when we talk about everyone talking to different people and kind of the worlds combining, there's a lot of times we end up connecting dots with partners to say, hey, our team's out here talking to the buy side. They want to get in front of these valuable iOS audiences. They're trying to figure out how to do it. And they don't just want to do a like, hey, give me any iOS advertisers. To your point, put some irrelevant advertising out there. Like, how do I do that with the target upon it? On the flip side, on our sell side conversation, like we said, some were like, we didn't think we could do anything. So we'll actually start to bring folks together to say, we can use these audiences with you. You can layer them on. Furthermore, here's advertisers that want more of that iOS inventory. They're hungry for it. How do we make sure they can still get to this specific auto intender, people exposed to this specific political candidate, and make sure they're still doing so across all media platforms, not just, hey, I want them on a desktop computer. Make sure it's still on CTV, make sure it's still on the Safari browsers, on the Apple devices, etc.
Right, right. When I think about sort of the loss of precision that we've had as a result of sort of this ongoing, 10-year third-party cookie erosion, I sort of think about context or category, device. Then there's like time of day and geography, and to the extent that you can sort of predict that you'll reach the right person based on some combination of that, it's really useful. So are there other missing elements of targeting that folks should be layering in as well? Even if they don't have identity.
Sure. I mean, I think my big thing here is we don't have to forget about the audience, even with the imprecise signal. So, context, still a signal that's out there, as you said, we can use that, but let's bring them together. So, the AI modeling against first party data sets or things like our data still enable these additional, signals, if you will, to be used for targeting. So demographics, in-market behaviors, audience interest or persona groups, things like that. I think, to your point, a lot of us have associated them with being tied to IDs and the only way to get to them, but they're not actually gone. And just because those signals, as we know them, have become more limited, it doesn't mean that the personalized and targeted advertising is going to go away. So we do have these privacy-centric solutions bringing together AI modeling, gives the targeting longevity at the end of the day. And it's still those audiences we're accustomed to. It's just, again, the same way I say it breaks my brain of why is this partner talking to this partner? It's like we all need to train ourselves like, okay, audiences and identity are not just tied to IDs at the end of the day. We don't need those trade-offs between privacy and relevancy. But at the same time, to your point, still have the context layered in. We still want the category, the device, the time of day, geography. It's not, hey, I want this audience, but it can be the middle of the night and, where no one's going to see an ad. It's a tree falls in the forest kind of thing here. Let's keep using all of them. It just doesn't require an ID at the end of the day. We can bring it all together, leveraging these data sets to still have audience targeting, serve it with a contextual signal.
Are there any fun examples of marketers using content and context as a strong proxy for user intent?
Yeah, I mean, to date, honestly, with our predictive audiences, we have over 5,000 advertisers leveraging them today. So I think great examples being like we talked about, of course, I can't say the candidate name, but on that, they won't let us until once this cycle's done. But on the political side, it's been a lot of fun. From that perspective, especially because, even in looking at content consumption these days, there's so much of that TV consumption that's happening on CTV. It's actually gone, it's completely flipped in the percentages. So there's more being consumed on CTV these days, but people are still used to, having that big reach mechanism of TV. They're putting the dollars in linear TV. So making sure they can do that retargeting side, but hit up CTV, hit up all the digital channels, that has been the most fun at a candidate level this year. We've done some really cool case studies with IBM, who's tapped into it on a B2B side at scale. And really just making sure, again, it's just been like, what are those KPIs they're after? Everyone's coming with something different. But at the end of the day, like there's a KPI, but scale is always there as the big one. And I'm really, really interested to see kind of what else is going to come as everyone. We've had years of a lot of testing. And I think, that tipping point really was a lot of the iOS changes last year. So we have a lot of the data that's been rolling in over the past couple months of all of the performance of those, and excited to take some of that to market soon.
Right. One area of, I guess it's excitement yet skepticism is this idea that as AI starts to, be able to digest these signals that are sitting in the ad server, sitting in the ecosystem, combining signals together from different sources, yours included, I think some folks are like, well, how much of a black box do I want versus, because you went from 20 years ago, like it was media buying was a very different animal, right? And so you sort of you knew what you were getting, right? And the more AI starts to take over and say, hey, I know what you're getting, but I can't really always tell you exactly what you're getting because, some of it's probabilistic, some of it is using signals of different strengths and, calculating which signals are most strong, et cetera. So do you feel like the community is ready to trust the AI when it comes to that, as opposed to sort of the folks who were very hands-on in the past, right, with regards to which targeting levers they were going to use?
I mean, yeah, I think that's a whole nother layer to our multi-pronged approach. I think, we still have, look at where we are this time of year right now. We still have the upfronts and the new fronts. There's plenty of those that are just like, hey, I know what inventory I want, and we're doing those deals. There's then this piece of it, and I think I have to be very careful when I say, are people ready to trust the AI? Let's say people are ready to trust certain types of AI out there. And I do think there's a lot that we have to share. and make sure it is not completely black box. There's things like, for example, when we're talking about ours, we're saying we still have massive panels. So it's not complete AI that no one would understand. It's AI that's mining all of this behavioral data we have from a panel of 2 million people worldwide. So we're saying, great, we know these folks fit in our seed set who are something like someone exposed to this political ad, or someone who has this health condition, or someone who has, bought potato chips. Any of these segments we have from ourselves or these data partners, the AI is then just really just trying to get way more granular to be able to say, what are all the different things that these people are consuming? What's that commonality in here? For us, it's a magnitude of 350,000 different topics so that we can leverage that granularity. And those are the types of things we share with clients, show them this methodology, how we're tackling it. So it's like, yeah, let's leverage the efficiencies where we can. Yes, there are parts that are proprietary in a methodology, but I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit, the proof is in the pudding. So it's trust the AI for this methodology. Here's the data sets we're tapping into. But then at the end of the day, yes, please go measure your campaigns as you always have. For ours, we've seen, we've done some testing. There's been, I think it's like over 87% accuracy with these ID-free audiences. So run these test campaigns, see how well they're working. You're checking the box for scale, obviously. We're making sure you can do your direct buys. You can come use this targeted. But is it working? It's not just a trust us and trust the AI. It's here's the proof behind it all. So maybe in some ways the AI is opening up some things you might not have expected before. We're not just saying, hey, you have to do endemic contextual advertising. So there might be places it picks up things you wouldn't expect. But when it performs at the end of the day, then okay, we see it.
Cool. So anything else exciting for you over the next year? Maybe stuff in the ecosystem or product roadmap you're allowed to talk about?
I would say for me, I'm keeping an eye. I mean, we've talked about politics. That's the big one. I'm personally just keeping an eye. I love also an Olympics year. So like geeking out a little bit, political year, Olympics year, seeing all of that with the streaming. And from our perspective, I think the other big area I've mentioned a few examples, and I think to kind of put a bow on it, a lot of these regulated industry, we're trying to make sure, because we have this privacy focused data. So a lot of advancements, even with LDA compliant audiences as well, and making sure those can be leveraged across CTV, in addition to what we've always had on a digital and a mobile perspective. So really just trying to make sure, again, like our guiding principles at the end of the day, it's kind of that privacy, scale, and precision. So I almost flip it and say, if there's someone listening and there's something I haven't said, you fit there, like throw it my way. We'd love to put it on the roadmap. We're always all ears.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining me and chatting about the ecosystem at large and the role your team play in it.
No, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.